They thought she married into wealth, but they never asked what she survived before entering that house. She grew up in a place people only remember when they need cheap labor: dusty roads, tin roofs, silent prayers before sleep. Her name was Amara. Amara learned early that life does not ask for permission before becoming hard. Her father died when she was 13. Her mother washed clothes for rich families who never remembered her name. Yet Amara never begged. She studied at night under a flickering bulb, books borrowed, shoes worn thin, dreams kept quiet. When the proposal came from the Kambale family, people whispered, "Why would a rich family choose a village girl?" But the truth was simpler and crueler. Their son, Daniel Kambale, needed a wife fast. A scandal was coming, and Amara was convenient. On the wedding day, her mother held her hands and whispered, "Speak less, observe more. Silence protects those without power." Amara nodded. She entered the mansion with nothing but dignity, and that was already too much for them. What Amara didn't know was that the house she entered had already decided her worth. The wedding was grand, but the bride was treated like an unwanted guest. Gold dripped from the ceiling, music echoed, cameras flashed, yet not a single hug came from her new family. Mrs. Kambale smiled for guests, but her eyes never smiled at Amara. During the ceremony, whispers followed her veil. "She's too quiet, probably uneducated. Village girls know nothing but survival." Amara heard everything. She always did. Daniel stood beside her, distant, not cruel, just absent. At the reception, she was seated far from the family table, like an afterthought. When she tried to help an elderly aunt, Mrs. Kambale snapped, "Sit down, don't embarrass us." That night, alone in a massive bedroom, Amara removed her jewelry slowly. Not because it was heavy, but because it did not belong to her. She whispered to herself, "I did not come here to be loved. I came here to endure." But endurance has limits, and this house was determined to test hers. By morning, she was no longer a wife. Amara woke before sunrise, not by choice, but by command. A maid knocked sharply. "Madam says you should help in the kitchen." Help became responsibility. Responsibility became expectation. Soon, Amara was cooking, cleaning, serving tea to people who never said thank you. Her sister-in-law laughed once and said, "At least she's useful." At family lunches, she stood while others sat. At dinners, she ate last, if at all. Daniel noticed, but he said nothing. Silence became his language, too. One afternoon, Mrs. Kambale said coldly, "Remember where you came from. We lifted you." Amara lowered her head, not in shame, in restraint, because deep inside her mind, numbers, strategies, and knowledge slept quietly. They thought her silence meant emptiness. They were dangerously wrong. They mocked her silence, not knowing it was discipline. Business conversations filled the dining room daily. Stocks, imports, losses. Amara sat quietly, eyes lowered. The brother-in-law joked, "She doesn't even understand English business terms." Laughter followed. But Amara understood every word, every mistake, every wrong assumption. She noticed numbers that didn't add up, contracts that smelled of loss. Yet she stayed silent. Why? Because her mother's words echoed. Never offer gold to people who value noise. Late at night, while the house slept, Amara wrote calculations in a notebook hidden under her mattress. She wasn't afraid. She was waiting. And soon, the house would begin to shake. One signature
was about to destroy everything. The Kambale family gathered around documents. A major deal, huge investment, risk hidden in small print. Amara stood at the door with tea. She read one line. Her heart tightened. The numbers were wrong, dangerously wrong. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Mrs. Kambale waved her away. "Go, this doesn't concern you." Amara walked out. But that night she did not sleep, because she knew if they signed, the empire would fall. And when it did, they would remember the quiet girl they never listened to. If you believe silence can hold power, subscribe. This story has only begun.
Respect is expensive in rich houses, and she was treated like she couldn't afford it. The guests arrived early that afternoon. Business partners, relatives, important names. Amara was told to serve tea. She moved quietly between chairs, careful not to spill a drop. But silence doesn't make you invisible. One guest looked at her and asked casually, "Is she the new help?" Before Amara could answer, Mrs. Kambale smiled. She's family, but still learning her place. Laughter followed, soft, cruel, effortless. Amara felt the heat rise to her face, but she did not respond. Her sister-in-law whispered loudly enough, "Village girls adjust slowly." Daniel looked away. That hurt more than the words. Later, as the men discussed business losses, Amara noticed panic hiding behind confidence. Wrong numbers, wrong projections. She wanted to speak, but she remembered every laugh, every look. So she swallowed her words, and the room continued, walking toward disaster without knowing it. The warning signs were everywhere, but pride refused to read them. Within weeks, the company started bleeding. Small losses at first, then phone calls, then silence. Suppliers demanded payments. Employees whispered fear. At dinner, voices grew sharper. Who approved this deal? The market betrayed us. Amara listened. She had already written the answer in her notebook. The problem wasn't the market. It was arrogance. One night, Daniel found her awake, papers spread quietly. He asked, "What are you doing?" Amara closed the notebook. Nothing that matters to this house. Daniel stared at her. For the first time, he wondered if silence could hide intelligence.
When she finally spoke, the room forgot how to breathe. The argument exploded at the table, voices overlapping, blame flying. Amara stood. Her voice was calm. "The loss is coming from Clause 17. Silence fell. Mrs. Kambale turned sharply. "What did you say?" Amara repeated it, slowly, clearly. She explained the loophole, the miscalculation, the timeline of collapse. Numbers rolled off her tongue like truth. The brother-in-law laughed nervously. "Who told you this nonsense?" Amara placed the document on the table. She didn't argue. She proved. But pride does not bow easily. Mrs. Kambale pushed the papers away. "Enough. Go back to where you belong." Amara nodded and returned to her silence. The most dangerous lies are the truths we choose to ignore. The signature happened the next morning. Ink sealed their fate. Amara watched from the stairs. She felt no anger, only certainty. Within days, the bank notice arrived. Accounts frozen, deadlines missed. The same people who laughed now whispered. Mrs. Kambale's confidence cracked. She locked herself in meetings. Daniel avoided Amara's eyes, because now everyone remembered what she had said, and no one could pretend they hadn't heard it. They asked for her help, but she asked for dignity. Late at night, Daniel knocked on her door. No anger, no authority, only fear. He asked softly, "Can you fix this?" Amara looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "I will help, but not as a maid, not as a joke, not in silence." Daniel nodded. The next morning, Amara sat at the table, no tray in her hands, no orders given, only calculations, only solutions. The house watched quietly, because for the first time, they understood something terrifying. They had underestimated the wrong woman.
She fixed their empire quietly and let them believe she wasn't there. Amara did not take a seat at the head of the table. She chose the corner. Laptop open, numbers moving, phone vibrating with calls no one else understood. She worked at night when the house slept. Emails sent under Daniel's name. Corrections made without applause. Slowly, suppliers relaxed, payments restructured, deadlines extended. The company began to breathe again. At breakfast, Mrs. Kambale spoke proudly. "At least our son is handling the crisis." Amara stirred her tea. She said nothing, because survival was not her goal anymore. Control was.
Some people steal money, others steal credit. At the emergency board meeting, the brother-in-law stood confidently. Charts appeared, solutions presented. Every idea was hers, every fix hers. Applause followed. "Brilliant work," someone said. Amara sat behind the glass wall, watching her thoughts wear another man's face. Daniel noticed, but he stayed silent, because silence had protected him once too. That night, Amara wrote one line in her notebook: "Power that fears exposure always overreaches." He stole her mind, but forgot she owned the proof. The brother-in-law grew bolder. Media interviews, public praise, confidence inflated. But during one live presentation, a question came he hadn't prepared for. Technical, specific. He hesitated. The room waited. Amara, watching remotely, sent one message. The answer appeared on his screen. Saved him again. That was the moment she decided this would be the last time. They mistook her patience for weakness and charged her nothing for it. Mrs. Kambale called Amara in privately. Her tone had changed. "You are helping us. We appreciate it." Appreciation, not respect. Amara responded calmly. "Then stop pretending I don't exist." Mrs. Kambale frowned. "Know your limits." Amara smiled faintly. She already knew theirs. That night, she organized every file, every timestamp, every email. Truth neatly arranged. The truth doesn't shout. It walks in with documents. The boardroom filled again. This time, Amara entered openly. She placed the laptop on the table. One by one, files appeared. Original drafts, email trails, correction logs. Silence thickened. The brother-in-law's smile faded. Daniel's hands trembled. Mrs. Kambale stared at the screen, recognizing the handwriting she had ignored. Amara spoke softly. "I didn't ask for credit.
I asked for dignity. No one interrupted, because power had shifted, and everyone in the room felt it. A single mistake can topple an empire, but some storms are invisible until they arrive. The office was silent, too silent. Screens glowed, phones buzzed, emails lined up like warning signs no one read. Amara moved through the corridors unnoticed, her steps quiet, but her mind storming. The numbers whispered truths the family refused to see, losses hiding in plain sight, mistakes carefully masked as routine. Outside, the city lights reflected on glass towers, showing success that barely existed. She calculated, recalculated, every possibility. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but anticipation. The empire teetered, and for the first time, Amara let herself imagine, what if they finally realized I was the only one holding it together? Fights aren't always loud. Sometimes they're fought in silence. Amara sat alone in the conference room. The hum of air conditioning filled the space. The house slept above, oblivious. She mapped every risk, every deception, every hand that tried to claim her work as its own. The power in her mind moved faster than their eyes could follow. She saw patterns no one else could, a cascade of mistakes that would destroy everything by morning. And yet she waited, silent, watching. The quiet was her weapon, and patience her shield. Some truths are buried, but they leave a trail. Files hidden in drawers, emails tucked away, spreadsheets no one checked. Amara opened a folder labeled irrelevant. Inside, she found the final piece. The numbers didn't lie. The evidence didn't judge. It only whispered, "Here is the story they refused to see." She smiled faintly, because soon the empire that ignored her would be forced to look. Her patience had transformed into power. Silent, unstoppable, undeniable. When someone underestimates you, their world begins to tremble before they even know it. The morning began like any other. Birds chirped, the city woke. But inside the mansion, tension thickened. Accounts balanced differently, emails rerouted, decisions subtly corrected. Every small change caused ripples. Daniel noticed things he couldn't explain. The brother-in-law grew nervous, and Mrs. Kambale? She felt a shift she couldn't place, a quiet force moving behind the walls of her house. Amara walked past the hall. Nothing about her had changed, but everything around her was already different. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it slips in quietly. By evening, the house moved to her rhythm. Decisions made in her absence were suddenly perfect. Mistakes she hadn't been credited for were quietly corrected. The family tried to maintain pride. The brother-in-law still smiled. Daniel still spoke little. But the mansion itself knew. Every room, every corridor, every desk echoed her influence. The empire had changed, without a single person fully realizing who held the reins. Amara sat back in her chair. She didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She simply breathed. Because she knew, true power doesn't need witnesses. It only needs patience. Some victories are quiet, but their echoes shake the proudest walls. The morning sun barely touched the city skyline, but inside the Kambale mansion, a storm brewed differently this time. Amara walked through the grand hall. Every step was measured, calm, deliberate. Her eyes scanned the room, not for approval, but for truth. The family moved as if nothing had changed. Mrs. Kambale and her silk dress, feigning command.
the brother-in-law smiling confidently, unaware that his credit had been hollowed out. Daniel, quiet, watching, as though finally realizing the magnitude of what had been unfolding before his eyes all along. Amara entered the boardroom. No one spoke. The screens were blank, the spreadsheets untouched. She opened her laptop slowly. Files and reports glided across the screen. Every misstep, every correction, every hidden error neatly documented. The proof of her work undeniable and meticulous. She did not demand attention. She did not raise her voice. She allowed the room to absorb the truth quietly, painfully. Numbers rolled like thunder. Charts revealed the gap between claims and reality. Emails traced credit back to the hands who had attempted to take it. The brother-in-law's confident smile faltered. Daniel's hands trembled slightly. Mrs. Kambale's eyes widened. They realized, slowly, painfully, that Amara had been the silent force holding their empire together all along. Amara closed her laptop gently, looking at each of them. She did not gloat. She did not accuse. She simply said, "The work speaks for itself. I only ask that it be recognized, not taken." For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy, unavoidable, transformative. And in that silence, the mansion remembered that power is not measured by loud voices, but by patience, skill, and quiet determination. Amara left the boardroom. No applause followed, no celebration, but the house itself had shifted. Rooms that once echoed judgment now whispered respect. Corridors that once felt cold now hummed with acknowledgement. She didn't need them to understand her fully. They had already seen enough. Because the empire remembered, and from now on, it would never underestimate her again.
Some stories end not with noise, but with every heart finally paying attention. The mansion was silent in a different way now, not the tense silence of judgment, not the hushed whispers of superiority, but the quiet hum of respect, the calm of truth finally recognized. Amara walked through the hall, her steps steady. Each room she passed seemed to breathe differently. The air no longer weighed on her shoulders, the walls no longer pressed in with expectation or doubt. She entered the boardroom one last time. The family sat quietly, their pride tempered by realization. Mrs. Kambale's face softened, not with affection yet, but with acknowledgement. The brother-in-law avoided her gaze, humbled. Daniel watched, his silence heavy with understanding and admiration. Amara placed a folder in front of them. It contained every correction, every analysis, every hidden mistake she had quietly fixed. The work she did in shadows, the effort no one credited, was now clear for all to see. She spoke softly, almost like a whisper carried across the room. "I never asked for recognition. I never asked for praise. I asked only for fairness and for my voice to matter." For the first time, Mrs. Kambale nodded. A quiet, almost reluctant respect glimmered in her eyes. Daniel finally stood and approached her. "You didn't just save the company. You changed us, and I'm grateful." Amara smiled faintly, not from pride, but from peace. The battle was over, and she had won, not by yelling, not by fighting publicly, but by being patient, observant, and unwavering in her dignity. She turned to leave. The mansion seemed to shift with her presence, less intimidating, more alive. She had not only saved an empire, she had quietly reminded everyone of what truly mattered: respect, patience, intelligence, and the power of those who never speak too soon. Sometimes the quietest girl in the room is the one who changes everything. She does not need to shout. She does not need to fight. She only needs to survive, endure, and rise.
If you've ever been overlooked, if someone ever underestimated you, remember Amara, your silence is your strength. Like, share, and subscribe to follow more stories of courage, patience, and triumph.